when you get too disconnected from the roots of your success, it creates an inevitable failure. Some of it is just due to mathematics. Like, say, for example, that first king had 5 kids. Each of his kids had 5 kids. And I'm using such big numbers because wealthier people have significantly higher birth rates. And then your next generation maybe has only 3 kids each. It's still, you have like multiple double digit great grandchildren, and they're all fighting for the same fortune, especially since investments weren't as sophisticated and people weren't as financially literate in investing in those old days of the Persian kings. You're now dividing the same pie with more mouths to feed. Mm-hmm. And that kind of what creates some of these problems. The second, that can be solved in the modern day by just people compounding their investments enough so that the original nest egg grows big enough to split generation by generation. But the second thing that really causes the problem is just by enough generations, especially assuming that like these next generations are less likely to have the same aptitude and personal qualities that led to the success of the founding family, particularly if they marry outside their social class or of people who do not have the same values or aptitudes that they did. And so therefore they may by the time you have 3 or 4 generations down, it's not really the same caliber of person who would be running it that in the past. And then there's also just the incentive structure of people who are born with everything and don't really need to work for it, don't really realize the responsibility that they have. And so they live a little bit more too loose with their money and end up making major financial mistakes. Like I highlighted this in one of my videos about the 5th generation heir of Hermes, who had his financial advisor steal up to 15 billion of Hermes stock from him under his nose because he didn't really bother to pay attention to or manage his personal finances in a more direct manner.
And everyone you meet at that point, like when you're part of these elites, you can't trust friendships for what they are. I mean, there's always incentives, and even if people are real people, eventually there's just so much money and power involved that it distorts all relationships that we normally would have had because we wouldn't have these kind of incentives.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's why if you are in that level of tier, you need to downplay your lifestyle to a certain degree. You should come off as somebody who makes $200,000 to $500,000 a year as your public figure, even if you make more than that, because that's enough to prove that you're respectable, but not enough that people are going to try to take advantage of you.
I mean, literally, they could kidnap you and hold your ransom. That kind of stuff would happen, especially back in the day. These bigger families, the famous ones, would have the Rockefeller people would have people kidnap their family members and hold them hostage.
Yeah, I mean that even happened with the Hearst family in the 70s.
Well, crazy situation.
So,
well, thank you so much. I definitely will get the imagery. I'll put it on there. It's everything you mentioned, like for example about the relationships, the different classes. You have videos on this I've watched. So these are all potentially controversial subjects, but it kind of naturally does make sense if you're outside your classes and you marry. Is going to be so much differences, almost like having someone from a different language or country. The norms are going to be different based on these classes.
Yeah, I mean, other than religion, it's probably the single biggest issue when it comes to compatibility, honestly, is your class upbringing. It's not purely a money thing, as we mentioned with the hierarchy, but you're probably going to have somebody in common, the same social class as you, from another country of the same religion than you would of somebody of a different social class within your own country.
There's old saying like the elites of different countries have more in common than they do with the people in their own country. They're just a certain strata of the world. The problems they deal with is completely different.